What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of After the Whistle. And I'd like to start today's show by saying, I know I missed the normal, Monday show. Normally I have a recap show on Monday. Wasn't able to do that. And the reason for that is there was a lot of underlying issues. I had an update on my laptop that I had to install that unfortunately took a lot longer than I thought. I really didn't want to be up until midnight, 1 o'clock, recording the show. So my apologies on that. Also, I think I mentioned on the last couple episodes we had some soundproofing things that we were trying to do. And we finally got a couple of those things done. Still have some things left to do, but for the most part, we have the soundproofing, we got the rug, we got the acoustic panels on the wall. Hopefully makes it sound a little bit better here in this episode. I'm sure that if it doesn't sound good, y'all aren't going to tell me because I ask, and even then, y'all still say, man, it sounds good. I can't. I'm my own worst critic, guys. I'm just saying. So either way, welcome back to another episode wherever you're listening from, whether it be YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon. Thank you for tuning in to another episode here. Going to jump into some portal talk. The portal giveth and the portal taketh away, literally. And we have some movers. I have the portal, pulled up on my monitor here. So we'll go through some movers and shakers and what schools are making the biggest moves, what players are making the biggest moves, things of that sort. We'll go through that here in a minute. Also, we will recap the 2 college football playoff semifinal games. Not going to quite preview the national championship just yet. We're going to do that later in the week. We'll talk probably briefly about, the game, just to kind of touch on it. But as far as doing the deeper analysis of that football game, we will wait until later in the week to do that. So first things first, whether or not, there's a lot of talk in college football recently, portal, NIL, things of that sort. People make people say it's ruining the game. It's ruining just the overall essence of college football. And you know what? Sometimes I really tend to agree with that statement. I've never been one to really enjoy this mad dash that the portal creates every single year. It creates a lot of storylines, which is good. If you're a podcaster and you talk about college football, it's good for business because it constantly gives you something to talk about. Controversial things you can talk about and things of that sort. But at the same time, this has turned into an absolute bidding war. And I know I've said it. If I've said it once, I've said it numerous times on this show. It was never intended to turn into a situation where you've got players in the portal that are committed to a school, and then at the 11th hour, another school swoops in and offers more money, and then that player decommits and commits to the school with more money. We have had that happen over the last week, essentially, in the portal. And I'll pull up something here on my monitor to share with everybody, and we'll talk about a situation with a Damon Williams, quarterback from Washington. And if anybody watched any of Washington Huskies football this year, very talented quarterback. Over the last week, there was a rumor out there that LSU was a big player here with Damon Williams for his services next season. Now, the problem that came from that was the fact that Damon Williams had just re-upped and, I hate saying this, re-signed with the Washington Huskies. If you've listened to me long enough, you know how much I hate the re-signing of your players. I can't stand it. This isn't the NFL, it's college football, but likewise, we got to roll with the times here. But he signed a deal with Washington to stay there, play the 2026 season. Well, then, here towards the last minute, the 11th hour, so to speak, we had LSU come in to try to take him from Washington. The problem that is he had already signed his name, already signed on the contract. His agent This shows you how slimy of a move this was, or attempted to be, by Damon Williams. His agent quit. His agent released a statement essentially quitting, saying, I wish him nothing but the best, moving forward, whatever else. That tells you everything that you need to know, okay, about this situation. When an agent, sometimes, these college football agents, sometimes the slimiest of the slimy are college football agents. And for that guy to go, this is a little bit too much for me, and move on and basically quit, that says something. The other question, and what comes from this, what stems from this situation, is now you've got Damon Williams released a statement just the other day, and I'll read it here. I have it pulled up. It says, "After thoughtful reflection with my family, I'm excited to announce I will continue my football journey at the University of Washington. I'm excited to reunite with my teammates and to lead the University of Washington to success in the 2026 season and beyond." So to paraphrase, I couldn't get out of my contract. That's what that statement's saying. Because here's the thing. If you've played a sport, you've played a team sport, fellow football players, level with me on this one, baseball players as well, basketball, team sports guys, listen really closely when I say this. If a player were to do this and try to jump ship and go to another school, and now he's coming back, that was his, you've got to think, Washington was his fallback plan if the LSU thing didn't work out. If his agent couldn't get him out of the contract that he signed with Washington, Washington was the fallback. How? And if I'm a member of that locker room, here's the thing. How hard does he have to work to win that locker room back? This is your quarterback. And don't get me wrong, not all quarterbacks are leaders. So don't hear something I'm not saying there. Because the leader of your offense could be the center. Just like on the defense, it could be anybody. It could be a safety, it could be a linebacker, it could be defensive tackle, defensive end, whatever. But the quarterback is generally the position that makes it all go here. The quarterback is generally the person that people look to lead the football team. They are the leader of the offense by way of they distribute the football. So how hard do you have to work in this situation if you're Damon Williams to win the trust of your teammates back? Because your teammates are sitting back watching this all play out, and people can think whatever they want. People can sit here thinking that there's a player on Washington's team that's sitting back watching this going, our quarterback tried to chase a bag at LSU, but, he chose to stay here. No, he didn't choose to stay there. That's not the situation here. He didn't choose to stay there. He decided that he didn't want to enter litigation with Washington. He couldn't win the lawsuit. He knew he couldn't get out of the contract. Now he's back there. Going back to Washington was his plan B. It was his fallback plan if the LSU thing didn't work out. So don't kid yourself and think that he's there because he wants to be. This is what college football has become. This situation just irritates me. If I'm the coach, I don't know. He might sit a couple games. But you got a lot of money invested in him. So now the players are calling the shots. So my hat's off to Washington putting their foot down in this situation and enforcing the terms of the contract, keeping Damon Williams on campus, keeping him as a member of this football team. Hats off to Washington for a job well done there. We have also had some other situations that have arisen with a running back out of NC State by the name of Hollywood Smothers. An NC State running back, last year, very dynamic running back for NC State, and last season committed to Alabama here just a few days ago. At the 11th hour, the Texas Longhorns swoop in and the rumor is, and this is a rumor mill thing, so take it with a grain of salt. Not everything that you hear on the rumor mill is true, but take this with a grain of salt. So here's the rumor. This comes from recruits.cfb on Instagram. It's a good follow if you want to check them out. They post a lot of this stuff. So the rumor is Alabama running back commit Hollywood Smothers is visiting Texas right now after lying to reporters from both the Alabama and Texas side about visiting. He's also currently enrolled in classes at the University of Alabama. Well, then it turns out this was the rumor posted that he was visiting Texas. Turns out it was true. He was visiting Texas and lied to people at Alabama. Now he's a Texas signee. What do we make of this situation is simple. Bag chasing. Signed to Alabama, Texas come along, offered to write a fatter check. Thus, the kid bounces, goes to Alabama, or goes to Texas. This is what the sport has become. A bidding war for these players. This is not what it was intended to be with NIL. But once you open the floodgates, it's there. Once the dam busts, it's hard to put it back together. It's like the analogy that I've used before on this show. Toothpaste back in the tube. Can't do it. I do feel like that there are some parameters that can be established to make this process more team-friendly in a way to protect these schools. Regardless, though, legally, he was a verbal commit to Alabama. So Alabama fans that you see that are just all up in arms about this, about the kid flipping to Texas and all this stuff, you have to treat transfer portal recruits like high school recruits. A commitment means nothing until the ink is on that letter of intent. The commitment means nothing. High school players, year in, year out, we see high school players that will commit to a school and on signing day they flip. We see it all the time. That's been going on since the beginning of college football. It's been going on. Transfer portal is the same thing. We're seeing the same thing with these players. They come in, they say, I'm committing to Alabama, and then now it's just there's a different dynamic that has entered the fold. It's not 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, Texas had no shot stealing a player from Alabama. Alabama was in the, they were in the driver's seat in the SEC. They were winning championships. And that's what sold Alabama on a lot of these recruits. And now you have schools like Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and other schools that can write those big checks and draw these recruits away from these schools like Alabama. And that's exactly what happened here. So, this is the state of the sport. And you don't have to like it. I don't. But regardless, it's where we're at now. And once we went down this rabbit hole, it's hard to pull it all back in, so to speak. So here we are. All right, so transfer portal. I got a couple talking points I want to talk about before we move into the recap of the semifinal games. One of them being, we'll go over the transfer portal. I had it pulled up a second ago. So some new developments on the portal front just in the last real 24 hours. We've got Sam Leavitt, by far one of the prized possessions in the transfer portal, has announced he's committed to LSU, going to play in Lane Kiffin's offense, which is, to me, a very, very good fit for Sam Leavitt to play in that offense. Very quarterback-friendly offense. Comes from Arizona State to LSU. Brendan Sorsby, quarterback from Cincinnati, was the second-ranked player in the portal. He's going to Texas Tech. The rumors that you've probably seen out there of him and the money that he's getting My God, man. $5 million is what's being reported that he's going to be making to play quarterback for the Texas Tech Red Raiders. So Texas Tech, these Texas schools are going all in. They're spending just enormous amounts of money on players in the portal. Speaking of spending money on players in the portal and schools in Texas, we also have Cam Coleman, former Auburn receiver. In my opinion, Cam Coleman, one of the most talented players in the portal by far. I mean, he's ranked number 4 in the portal, but needs some more fine-tuning. He's got the elite athleticism, runs great routes. The ball security thing is a concern for me with Cam Coleman. And sometimes he can get a little bit, his hands can get a little bit slick. But very elite size at 6'3", about 200 pounds. Big, just long, lanky frame, elite catch radius, good speed. He's got the tools. He just needs to be polished up a little bit. He's going to Texas. I feel like he's going to thrive in that offense because Steve Sarkisian, the way that he coaches, the way that he calls plays, it's very receiver-friendly. And I think we're looking at this next year, and we look at Texas having Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo. I think we look at one of the best wide receiver tandems in the country in those two. So, a big get for Texas, in the portal there. Also, we've got Chaz Coleman, the 6'4", 246-pound edge from Penn State, committing to play for Tennessee. Tennessee with a new defensive coordinator, moving on, needing to kind of reestablish. Tennessee was one of those schools where 2 years ago they were in the top 20, I believe, top 15 in total defense and defensive efficiency. This year this past season, they took a big step back. I don't even know if you could classify it as a step back. They took a big leap backwards, and they were well outside of the top 100 in defensive efficiency and total defense. So something need to be done there. Tennessee reloading a little bit with the addition of Chaz Coleman. A couple more notable additions in the portal from other schools. James Smith, the defensive lineman from Alabama, committing to Ohio State. Isaiah Horton, also receiver for Alabama, committing to Texas A&M. So Alabama's one of those schools, kind of a head scratcher. I mean, yes, they did sign the number 2 ranked class in the country last year, and then they've had some really good high school recruiting classes coming into Alabama. So I feel like they're going to be a very young team next year. They have a lot of these playmakers. Isaiah Horton, one of those guys that was a elite playmaker, very good receiver, 6'4", 208, just one of those guys where when Alabama needed a play to happen, he was the guy to make it happen this year. So he's definitely going to be – it's a big loss for them. He's moving on to Texas A&M, which is a very good fit for him to play in that offense with Marcel Reed and the weapons that A&M is returning as well. I feel like it's a good fit for him. Some other very interesting developments. DJ Lagway, former Florida quarterback, now going to play for the Baylor Bears. There was also a rumor out there earlier in the week that he was talking to Ole Miss after he had committed to Baylor. Don't know. I saw a couple things on message boards and rumor mills and things like that of that happening. I never was able to confirm it. I was never able to actually dig into it and find evidence of it. It was just a couple people saying a few things that he was talking to Ole Miss. But currently, as we sit right now, at the time of this recording, he's still committed to Baylor on 247sports.com. So we're going to roll with that. Dylan Raiola, Nebraska quarterback. One of the bigger surprises to enter the portal, for me anyway. Big surprise for me. I was kind of shocked he entered the portal, but he's going to be going to Oregon. Obviously, a lot rides on that decision because you have Dante Moore at Oregon that is eligible for the draft. Don't know if he's going to come back. So if he comes back, Raiola will be ultimately sitting a year because I don't see a world where Dylan Raiola starts over Dante Moore unless Dante Moore gets hurt or something of that nature. I see a world where if Dante Moore comes back to Oregon, Dylan Raiola sits a year and then takes over that offense after Dante Moore moves on. But very weak quarterback class in the draft this year. Wouldn't say weak. Don't want to really disrespect some of the players that we've got in the draft that like Mendoza and all those, but the draft doesn't have a plethora of quarterbacks like we've had in years past. So there's just a lot of empty spaces, and a guy like Dante Moore might consider, he might consider going into the draft because of that. You want to cash in now because you're going to have some really good quarterbacks that are going to be draft eligible next year, going to go into the draft. So maybe it's a year where he skips town in Oregon and Dylan Raiola takes over. But either way, that's something that remains to be seen. A couple other, Deuce Knight, the promising quarterback recruit from Auburn, is now going to Oxford to play at Ole Miss. They're currently with the Trinidad Chambliss situation, which we'll talk about more in depth here in just a second. That's kind of up in the air as well, if Deuce Knight will start next year in Oxford or if he's going to be sitting. Definitely has the talent, needs to be polished a little bit, definitely needs to work on his pocket presence, needs to work on a few things, reading defenses. He's got the intangibles, he's got the athleticism, he's got the arm strength, just needs to work on ball placement and a couple other things. Definitely one to keep an eye on if, in fact, Trinidad Chambliss does not come back. I feel like he could be a very dynamic part of that Ole Miss offense. Byron Brown, quarterback from USF, no surprise there. He follows Alex Golesh to the University of Auburn, or Auburn University, excuse me. And let's see, Isaiah Canyon, Georgia Tech wide receiver, going to go to Georgia, so going to flip sides in the clean old-fashioned hate rivalry. Flipping over to Georgia, going to be playing in Athens. Big target, kind of a guy with Noah Thomas and Colby Young moving on from Georgia. Isaiah Canyon's kind of that big physical threat, 6'4", 215, 220. That's one of those red zone guys, big third down guy, long arms, long frame, elite catch radius, just one of those guys that can really, get it done for you. And he's got, I think, a couple years of eligibility left as well. Eric Singleton going to Florida, going to be playing in John Summerall's offense. I feel like that's a big get for the Florida Gators. Rocco Becht, no surprise, he's going to be going to Penn State following his coach Matt Campbell from Iowa State. Nick Marsh, one of the most underrated receivers in this portal class. Y'all have heard me mention him before. Look out for this guy. 6'3", 203, going to be playing for the Indiana Hoosiers next year in a very receiver-friendly offense. Indiana bringing in another good quarterback, and definitely something to keep an eye on there with Nick Marsh. Okay, so mentioned it a few seconds ago with the Trinidad Chambliss thing, which we talked about. I don't think we've talked about it yet. Maybe. I might correct myself in a minute. But Trinidad Chambliss is now suing or pursuing, a lawsuit against the NCAA because he filed for another year of eligibility. It got denied. His waiver was denied. This would be a sixth year of eligibility, citing the, COVID year. I think there's 1 year he spent majority of the year injured. So seeking that 6 year of eligibility. And here's the thing. I do not agree with this whatsoever. You've got 23 and 24-year-olds in college. I don't agree with it. Now, it's only a matter of time before this system and the wrinkles work itself out. It'll be another year or two. All of these players will be gone. We'll be back to seeing 22-year-olds being the, quote, oldest, players really in college football. But thanks to the COVID year exemption and how loosely the NCAA has allowed players to get an extra year of eligibility due to injury, this monster was created by the NCAA. So It's like, man, you've given it 5 years. 6 years, no player, I don't care who you are, no player should be playing college football for 6 years. Likewise, you've got rosters out there, or meanwhile, you've got rosters out there with 24-year-olds all over the field when there's 21 and 22-year-olds in the NFL right now. It's just ridiculous that you have players in college older than NFL players. And don't get me wrong, it's not like that's the first time that's ever happened. You've had players in the past that after their junior year, after their third year, they declare for the draft. They go to the draft, they're 21 years old, and then you have seniors in college that are 22. I understand that. That's understandable. But what's crazy to me is you have a 21-year-old and a 22-year-old, and you have in the NFL, and you have players in college that are 2 years older than that guy or 3 years older than that guy. And so I feel like I'm just going to have to say I think that Trinidad Chambliss is just one of them things. Like, it's one of those scenarios the NCAA has got to eventually just say enough. You know, we've got to put a stop to this. Somebody's got to be made an example out of. Unfortunately, it's got to be a guy like Trinidad Chambliss, who I genuinely like. I think he's a great kid. I think he's a really good quarterback. I called him the most dangerous quarterback in the college football playoff, and look what he did to my Georgia Bulldogs. Like, we made our point here. But when you look at a stat like this right here, and I'll pull it up on the screen here so I can read it, but Indiana players, and this is not me picking on Indiana, which is something we'll talk about here in just a second. Let's kind of segue into this. Another talking point that I would like to get to is Indiana players, ages 22 to 25. Indiana has 47 of those players in that age group on their roster. You have E.J. Williams, a receiver who played with Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. The same Trevor Lawrence that we just watched lose to Josh Allen in the wild card playoff round in the NFL playoffs. So, like I said, this will all work itself out. A couple more years, you get the COVID exemption, players, they kind of get, I don't want to say weeded out, but they move on, and then you'll get back to a younger player base in college football. But with all the extra opportunities for exemption that we've seen over the last 5 years with the COVID year, and how, like I said, how loosely that they've been with allowing these players extra eligibility, this is what you get. To contrast Indiana having 47 players, 22 to 25. In the NFL, you have 140 players ages 21 to 22. Over 3 times as many players are on NFL rosters, 21 to 22. Indiana's got 47, 22 to 25. And now we segue into a segment where I had a question that was raised by somebody that brought this point up and said, in today's game, right now, 2026, or well, really 2025 season, and then now we are in 2026, is experience and age more of a defining factor in who you get to come play for your team as far as the portal? So obviously you're not plucking a kid from high school at 24 years old or 23 years old, so they have to come by way of the portal. What I'll say is this. Some of these players that were a 3-star coming out of high school that went to, let's just say they went to a school like, and I'm not picking on anybody here, but let's just say they went to a school like Indiana, okay? Or they went to a Kentucky or something. 3-star player went there, and they've exercised 4 years of playing and they're using their COVID exemption, say they're 23 years old. Now they got an extra year of eligibility and they go to Indiana. Well, you got to think, if that kid's a 2-year starter, or if that kid's even a 3-year starter, or let's say he was a 4-year starter, think of the sheer experience that you're talking about here. Let's talk about a kid that 18 years old, comes out of high school, goes to Kentucky, Indiana, whatever school you want to name, Virginia Tech, whatever. And now all of a sudden his last season decides he wants to transfer to Ohio State or Michigan or Georgia or Alabama or wherever. I will take that kid that was a former 3-star with 4 years of experience at the collegiate level. I'll take that kid 10 out of 10 times over a 5-star freshman. And I don't even think that's much of a hot take. And I've told people this over the last week, that I would take that kid over a 5-star freshman any day of the week, just because you can't replace the experience. It's going to take that 5-star freshman a season to get up to speed, maybe even longer than that. So you've got a kid that can leave the school he's at, come play for your school with all the experience that he's bringing with him. Also, at that rate, he's a 4th-year guy, 5th-year guy, whatever. He's not taking classes. He's probably graduated. He might be taking a few classes, whatever. I don't know. I mean, this situation's just bizarre to me how it all works out. But you got this kid. He can focus the great majority of his time on film study, practice, strength and conditioning, whatever else. Just can live and breathe football. And he's got the experience. I'll take that kid over a 5-star freshman any day of the week. And we wonder why Indiana just looks as good as they do. Because, man, they're full of they got a roster full of grown men, 24 years old. I heard somebody say Indiana's got a team full of NFL rejects, and I don't think that's fair, because there's a lot of these guys, Elijah Surratt, Hemby, Black, Mendoza. These guys are good. They're not NFL rejects. They're going to be playing in the league, especially a guy like Surratt, like a guy like Becker, Mendoza. These guys are going to be playing in the NFL. They're good enough. They're talented enough. But they're just older, 23, 24 years old. And I think Curt Cignetti, to his credit, is not bending the rules, not cheating, taking advantage of the rules that are in place that allows him to do this. That's exactly what's going on. And to me, hey man, go right home with it. There's nothing wrong with it, per the rules. Now, do I think rules need to change? Yeah, sure. But right now, there's nothing wrong with it, and he's taking advantage of it. So that's all you can really say. So, a sip of water and pick up my papers. I dropped them. All right, so moving into the semifinal recap. And don't get me wrong here. We had one really good game and we had one just absolute bloodbath. We'll go over the bloodbath first, okay, and get it out of the way. So look through my notes here. And when you see key areas, one of the areas for me, for Indiana, that makes them such a really good football team, and you can talk about the age factor and all this, but if you're going to tell me that Indiana beat Oregon the way they did because they have a team full of 23 and 24-year-olds, you really need to go back and look through Oregon's roster before you make that statement, because these are two of the two oldest teams in college football by way of average age in their starting lineups. So, that argument is invalid when it comes to this game right here on this paper. Like, that argument's invalid. The age doesn't matter. What does matter is when you want to be a team like Indiana that's as good as they are, they play mistake-free football. Just exceptional football. They don't make mistakes. They put you in tough situations. When's the last time you saw Indiana in 3rd and 15
I mean, I was thinking about that earlier today. I was like, they don't play behind the sticks. They're very disciplined. They don't make mistakes. Costly penalties, you name it. They just don't shoot themselves in the foot. They just play good, technically sound, fundamental football. And when you look at what happened with Oregon in this football game in the semifinal, and you fumbled the ball twice, you threw one interception. Indiana is going to capitalize. They are going to capitalize on those situations. When you turn the football over, they are going to make it hurt. At the very least, they're getting 3 points out of it. But I'm pretty sure the statistics will tell you that 3 turnovers equaled 21 points in Indiana's favor. I think where this game went downhill for Oregon is the pick six when the game started. First drive of the game for Oregon, Dante Moore throws a pick six. I'm not saying that it broke Oregon's spirit or it broke their will or anything like that, but what I will say is that is a big time, like, get your players hyped up type play when you go and D'Angelo Pons picks that ball off and runs it back. That is a big time momentum booster for your sideline. I mean, you saw that team going nuts when it was happening. That's where it all started. And then Indiana just was firing on all cylinders from that moment to the end of this football game. Final score of this one being 56-22. And the thing about it is, take the 21 points that Indiana scored off Oregon's turnovers off the board, and it doesn't matter. You take them off the board, they still won the game 35-22. They still produced organically 35 points. That's how good this team is. And shame on me for picking Oregon to win this football game. Shame on me for not really being an Indiana believer over really the last 3 weeks, because I picked against them a lot. I feel like that over the last 3 games, it's like, all right, well, man, I did pick them against Alabama. I felt like Alabama had no shot. But it's just, to me, it's like, man, you sitting around, you thought they were going to get beat by Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. It didn't happen. And then you look at the Oregon game, you think, well, this is where it happens. Nope. And they just keep on moving. They just play so technically sound. And they don't have to have a superstar performance from anybody. I mean, you're looking at a team 378 yards or 362 yards from Indiana. They were 11 of 14 on third down. And that's part of that. It ties into a little bit of the part of what I was saying a few minutes ago, to where they don't play behind the sticks. They're positive. First down, they get 3 or 4 yards. And second down, they might get 3 or 4 yards. And then they line up for like a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3. They throw a little swing pass. They throw a pass it in the flat. First down, keep it moving. They're so efficient, incredibly efficient. Fernando Mendoza was 17 of 20 for 177 yards, had 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. They ran the football for 185 yards, 40 carries, almost 5 yards a carry, penalized for 23 yards. They're just good. They're just really good. And I'm excited to see the national championship matchup between them and Miami. I feel like there's some stylistic things we can talk about when we talk about picking that game, what I think is going to happen. Stylistically, there's some really intriguing talking points between these two teams and that matchup that we will get into at a later date. So, but like I said, this was just an absolute. It wasn't a slugfest. It was a slugfest in the sense that Indiana just beat the snot out of Oregon. Like not even a real good game. And Dante Moore, thing about it is he didn't play bad aside from the interception. He still was 24-39, 285 yards, a couple touchdowns, threw the one pick that resulted in, a pick six. But other than that, it wasn't like, oh man, Dante Moore played terrible. That's why they lost. No, they just got beat in every single facet of the game. Indiana was better up front on both sides of the football. Offensive line, defensive line, Indiana was better. Indiana had better pass catchers, better weapons, the better quarterback, the better coach. And it's time we had a discussion about Dan Lanning here, because I know everybody wants to talk about, Dan Lanning, one of the greatest coaches in college football. A man that consistently chokes in the big moments. Y'all heard me say it. I don't have a problem with Dan Lanning. But what I can say is it's definitely time to have a discussion about why this team, this Oregon team, can look so good up until this point. They get to the playoff. They coast by James Madison, essentially. And then they beat Texas Tech the way that they do. And then they come into this spot when it's like, okay, you win this one, you're playing for a national championship, and they just piss down their leg. It's a recurring theme with Dan Lanning coach football teams. And it's not something that I feel like Oregon fans saying, I don't know if Dan Lanning's the guy. He went 2-1 in the playoffs this year. So it's not like, I don't think it's a scenario where you look at other options. I just think he's got a lot of soul searching to do, and he's got to think about, how are you going to compete with a team like Indiana? How are you going to compete at that level? How are you going to break through? Definitely some adjustments that need to be made there for Oregon. But on the other side, like I said, Indiana, very efficient. Fernando Mendoza, only throws for 177 yards, but 5 touchdowns. Doesn't really need to throw for a whole lot of yards. They ran the ball, however they wanted to. Kalen Black had 63. Hemby had 53. Kobe Martin got involved a little bit with 42 yards on 4 carries. Mendoza ran the ball. I mean, Mendoza is not a runner, but still had about 30 yards rushing on to his name. But Indiana was able to do whatever they wanted. And then we all know the playmakers, Elijah Surratt, Charlie Becker, Omar Cooper Jr., E.J. Williams. We know those guys. They even put D'Angelo Pons in there in an offensive package, threw him a pass, 6 yards. So they were toying with that at that point. At that point, it was like, okay, man, game's over. Like, we're doing this cute stuff now. But, either way, you got to show some stuff. Got to try some things out. When you're up 30 in the playoff semifinal, maybe you use it as an opportunity to try some stuff that you haven't tried all year. What's the worst that could happen? You throw a pick 6 and Oregon makes it a 5-score game. Just an absolute beatdown from Indiana. And it's just amazing to me that Cignetti has been able to do what he's done in the last 2 years at the helm there at Indiana. I will still say, though, Indiana fans, y'all are getting annoying. And I didn't even know y'all existed until 2 years ago. But let me tell you, been back and forth with certain podcasts that's Indiana fans. It's 2 Indiana football fans, which kind of ironically, the first episode that they released was like the 3rd or 4th week of the college football season last year. So that lines up with them all of a sudden, quote, being football fans. Because let's be honest, you look at the picture of the stadium 3 years ago on homecoming, there's like 40 people in the stands to watch a football game. Like, come on, man. Let's not pretend like you guys are diehards and you've been Indiana football fans for 20 years. You haven't had anything to cheer about except for the last 2. So it's, let's pump the brakes a little bit and quit acting like you're the new standard. You've been good the last 2 years, but let's just calm down. Let's just calm down and see where this goes. Okay, I like Cignetti. I like his model. I like what he's doing, but let's calm down and let's not pretend like now all of a sudden, you've been here for the last 2 decades, because you hadn't. Miami Ole Miss, another game, really, really good football game, aside from, in contrast to the other football game we watched in the semifinals. This was one that was really kept you on the edge of your seat. You had, Miami came out. It was kind of the areas that I'll read out here in just a second where Miami won this football game. It's very simple, okay? When you got an offense that can produce the big play like Ole Miss can. And don't get me wrong, they still got some explosive plays. But when you've got a guy like Trinidad Chambliss, and you've got guys like, Winston Watkins, or you've got guys like, Stribling, and you've got all of these players that can make the big play, that can make the 20-yard play, or that can make the 25-yard play, or make the big catch down the field. When you've got this, you have to have an offensive game plan to combat that. Miami's defense is good enough to line up and play with Ole Miss, but with Ole Miss's quick game, it was hard for the pass rush to get after Trinidad Chambliss, and that's exactly what happened. They weren't able to because of the quick game, because Ole Miss is going to snap the ball. They're going to get rid of it in, sub 3 seconds. Likewise, Ole Miss still got, Q Lacey had over 100 yards rushing, really missed, let's just say missed half the game with a hamstring injury. He only had 11 carries, really. So is the game different if he doesn't get hurt? I don't know. I don't know if we're going to go down that rabbit hole or not. But DeJon Stribling, Caden Lee, Daquan Wright, Harrison Wallace, they all had really good games. Wright had 64 yards. Caden Lee was 67. Stribling was 77. Wallace with 40. So they still were able to get some yards out of it. Ole Miss still with 398 yards of total offense. But here's the kicker. The biggest, I had to make sure it wasn't a typo, but I did know, like watching this game and getting there close to the finish of the game, I was like, man, Miami's had the ball a long time. I go and look, I'm looking at the real-time stats as I'm watching the game, and I look and I'm like, holy crap, Miami's had the football for over 40 minutes. They held the football for 2/3 of the game, 41 minutes and 22 seconds time of possession for Miami, 18 minutes and 38 seconds for Ole Miss. And if you want to beat a really dynamic football team, and you want to beat a team like Ole Miss that's going to, be high-powered, and they're going to score a lot of points, they're going to produce a lot of chunk plays and things of that sort. You want to beat a team like that, you have to be able to play keep away, and Miami did as good of a job as you could. This was the formula that Georgia should have followed the week before. Okay? Run the football. Miami had 191 yards, 51 rushing attempts. So Miami committed to the football, or committed to running the football, and committed to running the clock. And that's what you see here. Direct correlation. You have a direct correlation with this. 191 yards rushing on 51 attempts, and they held the ball for 41 minutes and 22 seconds. Like, easy to look at. 11 of 19 on third down. So those three stats, those three lines and those metrics is where Miami won this football game. 11 of 19 on third down, 191 yards rushing, 41 minutes and 22 seconds time of possession. Masterclass from Miami. I love the contrasting, not really contrasting styles that we've got in the national championship. We've got Indiana Hoosiers, we got Miami Hurricanes. We got Miami Hurricanes with that defense. Now they're going to be going up against a team that they can more or less get after the quarterback. Mendoza not as much of a threat running the football as Trinidad Chambliss. I'm not saying he's a statue in the pocket, but he's definitely not as elusive as Trinidad Chambliss, and he's not as good at extending plays as Chambliss is. So definitely a part that I'm really going to keep my eye on when it comes to that national championship game. But Ole Miss, regardless though, moving back into this game, regardless, heck of a season. For your coach to leave, for just all the outside noise, all the distractions, all the things that were going on within that football program, for them to just put their noses down and go to work, is my hat's off to them. Now, I will say, Ole Miss fans, you started to kind of get on my nerves a little bit. So, somebody had to knock you down a peg or two. It was Miami. At the expense of Georgia fans, it had to be the team that Carson Beck's playing quarterback for. So, but either way, had to bring Ole Miss fans down a peg or two. We were starting to hear about national championships and this and that, pump the brakes a little bit. But either way, just a tip of the cap. And, you got to tip the cap to the team that they were able to focus and really refocus and get in that mode to where they could just put their heads down, go to work, and, forget about the Lane Kiffin drama. Forget about all the potential storylines that were coming from that and just do their job. So either way, it's a successful season for the Ole Miss Rebels, and going to be really intrigued to see how they build off of it going into next year. Like I said, they got some transfer portal weapons coming in. Excited to see a full year under Pete Golding. See what they do. See how it looks. Maybe this year, this time on this show, we're talking about another good season from Ole Miss. Maybe we'll see. Likewise, though, we got a great national championship matchup set. I'm excited for it. Less than a week out, January 19th, which Monday, still, like I said, I will forever hate college football playoff games, especially the national championship being on a weekday. But either way, it's been like that for years. Here we are. They're not going to change it now. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear to be that way. But exciting matchup. Down there in Miami essentially playing a home game. The question is, they're going to be using the visiting locker room because they technically are the visiting team, so that's going to be kind of weird for them. Surely they're not going to let Miami use their home locker rooms. I don't know. I doubt it. I don't think that's the way that works. It's not the way it works ever. I don't think just because the team's playing in their home stadium that you give them all the perks of being the home team without being the home team. So either way, looking forward to that. Looking forward to talking more to y'all later in the week. We'll do a full national championship preview show, probably have some more storylines between now and then that we'll have to talk about by way of the portal, the drama surrounding it, everything else. I'm sure there will be some more storylines within the next couple of days that I will definitely want to talk about on this show. So until then, I'll catch y'all later. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week. And I'll see y'all, I think Thursday. Thursday, sound good? All right. Catch y'all later. Bye.